Maybe we'll finish before you retire.
I'm not retiring.
Can you put in, davening for like, granddaughter?
Yeah,
I sent you the info,
You-
right?
you sent me
I
the
sent you
email.
An email,
It
yeah.
has her name there. It has
No, but I'll give it to you if you want to write it down.
it. Text it to me better, like this. All
Okay.
okay. Um. Okay, so we're on page 510 at 18 Adar 2. So I want to take you on a little illustration before we get into the text. Today's the 11th. You have a wedding. How many people participate in a wedding?
The actual participants, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7. Why 7?
The rabbi,
Okay.
the bride and groom, and the
Okay.
4 people holding up the chuppah.
Okay.
I had a good reason for it.
Yeah. What about all of the family and
Yeah,
friends?
I said the immediate,
The guests. Okay. So technically for a wedding, you don't need a rabbi. You missed the 2 most important parts. You don't need 4 people to hold a chuppah. You could have a chuppah
Right.
that's self-standing.
it's more fun.
More important than a rabbi, because a rabbi actually doesn't make anything a rabbi doesn't accomplish anything at the wedding. The people, well, I shouldn't say that. Don't do a wedding without a rabbi, because if you don't have a rabbi, you won't know what you're doing, and it won't be a good wedding. So you need a rabbi. But for the marriage to take effect, you don't need a rabbi. You need 2 kosher witnesses. That's all you need.
That's awesome.
A bride and a groom and 2 kosher witnesses, huh?
Well, that's not person.
So a ketubah is rabbinic.
Oh,
It's a rabbinic invention. It's the earliest contract for protecting the woman's rights in a marriage. That's what it is. It's guaranteeing, giving her the guarantees both during his lifetime and if he dies or divorces her. But the ketubah is a rabbinic thing. Yes, we're forbidden. It's actually forbidden for a husband and wife to live together if there is no ketubah. Parenthetically, the Rebbe, when they, after the Rebbe's wedding, when they got back in the evening, they couldn't find the ketubah; it was misplaced. So his father-in-law had to quickly write a new ketubah, and so there are different witnesses on the ketubah than on the original ketubah. But because the ketubah sort of reminds the husband to be careful, because if he does anything not okay, or if he decides he wants to divorce her, there's a big bill attached. There's a big incentive not to divorce her. If she doesn't have the ketubah, then if he says to divorce her and she takes him to Bedin, she has no proof what it said in the ketubah. She can't show anything, so he's more incentive. He's sort of less incentive. Anyhow, that's just okay. So for a kosher wedding, no, all you need is a bride and groom and 2 kosher witnesses. However, for the average wedding, you have the family, the close family, the distant family, you have friends, okay? Then you have all of the people making sure the wedding happens. You have the caterers, you have the waiters, waitresses, you have the musicians, you have the photographers, the hall, flowers. Then you have all the people that went into getting the people who made the invitations and all the flights that brought everyone there, and all the cars that drove everyone there. And then you have the food that's feeding everyone, and the flowers and the water, all the collateral. So in a wedding, there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of parts that make up a wedding. Yeah. While we're getting all excited of all the different things that are attached to the wedding that we perhaps didn't think about when we first asked the question, let's say, imagine at the morning of the wedding, the groom decides, or the bride decides, she's not showing up to the wedding. She doesn't want to get married.
Okay.
Cold feet. It's happened before. And the groom says, we spent tens of thousands of dollars for the wedding. Hundreds of people have come for the wedding. Hundreds of pounds of food have been prepared for the wedding. Hundreds of flowers have been cut for the wedding. Why waste a good party? I'm not going to call off the wedding. We're going to have the wedding just without the groom, without the bride, or without the groom.
Okay.
Makes sense, right? If you think about it,
Might as well
why,
party.
might as well do it. Everyone's coming anyway. All the gifts were bought. Everything was done already. Why? Because one person out of the thousands of moving parts of the wedding, because one part decided not to show up, we're going to cancel the whole wedding? Does that make sense?
Well, but it's usually what happens.
Oh, why? Why does it make sense? Even though that calculation is a quantitative calculation. Quantitatively, it makes no sense that if one part of the wedding, like imagine the photographer called in sick. Would you cancel the wedding because there's no pictures? Of course not. Imagine even the musician called in sick. Would you cancel the wedding because there's no live music? Of course not. Even if the caterer called in sick and there's no food, would you cancel the wedding? Probably not. Imagine all the guests decided not to show up. There's a hurricane or COVID. Now no one could come. Would you cancel the wedding? Maybe you'd postpone. You wouldn't cancel the wedding because people can't show up. So why cancel the wedding because one person can't show up? Because obviously we understand there's everything. There's the quantitative part of it. There's also the qualitative element of it. And qualitatively, what makes a wedding a wedding?
The bride and
The
groom.
bride and groom. No bride and groom is no wedding. You can have a nice party, a bachelor party, a graduation party. You can have many different types of parties, but you don't have a wedding. So if the groom wants to have a party because he wants to feed all the guests that came, fine. But is it a wedding? No, it may be a very nice lavish hospitality for family and friends, but it's not a wedding.
He won't be smashing your glass.
Won't be smashing it. And he probably won't have a big smile on his face.
Right.
So today we're going to talk about a different type of wedding. Well, not a different type of wedding, but a little different type of wedding. We learned previously that the purpose for this God creating this world is to make a dwelling place, a home for himself in this low world. And we've been learning in the past few lessons in this chapter how when we do mitzvahs and we do a single mitzvah, it perhaps makes our arm or our mouth a dwelling place for God, and then collectively we make the whole world a dwelling place for God. Question is, even if every Jew did every mitzvah and everything they were supposed to do, we're still a 0.0 something of a percent of the population. God wants the whole world to be his dwelling place. How can we accomplish that if we're such a small percentage of the population, let alone if we're supposed to purify and elevate the physical elements? How much food of how much food is in the world? How much food do Jews eat? How many tables do we study at? I mean, there's millions of tables. We can only elevate a certain amount of them. There are countries where Jews aren't allowed. How are we supposed to elevate the things there? How are we supposed to transform a world when we are such a small percentage? Yeah. So the answer is the wedding. All of the parts of the wedding are there for the bride and groom. We have a groom. The groom is God. God wants to get married. Who's God going to marry?
Israel.
Why Israel?
He chose them.
Why?
It's the Torah.
Yeah, but why? Why did he choose us to give us the Torah? How do you choose bride? Let's talk, because males be the other way also. How do you choose a bride?
In some cases, you don't. The parents decide.
Yeah, but how do you know if why would the parents decide that this bride would work for their son? What do you look, huh?
It was the shidduch, but I mean, nowadays, the shidduch.
It doesn't matter either way. Why
Do it for different qualities, certain qualities that the potential bride has.
what's the core, the thing that if it's lacking, there's no marriage? Whether
Love,
love comes afterwards, hopefully. It starts with love, usually it fades away. Usually love is built on comes on the heels of respect, of getting to know the person. You marry someone that wants to dedicate their life to you, just like the other person's marrying you because they believe you're going to dedicate your life to them. If someone is a beautiful person on the inside and the outside, has the best qualities in the world, doesn't care for you, you're not going to marry them. You may want to marry them. You may try to entice them into marrying you, but they're not going to marry you. And by the way, this is a little bit what happened. What happened? God is looking in the world for a people to marry. So he's looking for a people that's devoted to him, that's dedicated to him. The problem is the people have abandoned him. Everyone has started worshiping idols. And then comes a child, Abraham, discovers God, and not only worships God, but tries to convince everyone else to and risks his life for it. God says, this is the wife I want. Once you choose the wife, it doesn't matter what happens tomorrow if she wakes up and she's not in the mood, or if her kids aren't in the mood. You married her. Once God chose Abraham, okay, not always do we act like God's wife. And God sometimes he conceals himself from us. He's not in the mood of talking to us. But once we're married, we're married. But God chose someone who dedicated, he gave him the Torah, he gave us the Torah, but he chose us for marriage. And that's the Medrash says that the day of giving of the Torah is the day of our marriage, the day that God married us. Now, it could be marriage has two parts to it. So the day of the giving of the Torah was the first part, the Mashiach will be the second part. Anyhow, regardless. Okay, now that God decided to marry the Jewish people, what do you do once you decide, once you propose, and she says yes? What's the next step?
You get married.
You just get married right there, right down there?
No, you plan a marriage. You're
First
engaged.
you have to plan. Why are you engaged? Because you have to plan a marriage. If you didn't have to plan a marriage, you just get married right then and there.
Right.
Why not? The reason you wait, at least in the Talmud, why did they traditionally wait a year for marriage? Because the woman had to go home, or whatever, had to go to her father's house and prepare for a wedding, for married life. Probably back then they had to build an addition to the house, or they had to, right? They had to prepare for the wedding. So now God has to prepare a wedding venue. So what's the wedding venue? The world. Now you have to get musicians and caterers and everyone that participates in the wedding. This is all the other people, the other 8 billion people in the world. And the food is all the food in the world. It's all necessary. What do all the caterers eat for the days they're preparing the food for the wedding? It all is part, if you think about it, it's all part of preparing for the wedding. Not everyone's aware of it always. It doesn't mean it's not happening. The person who's cutting the flowers in the field in some other country doesn't know that his flowers are going to end up on a wedding table. It doesn't make it not preparation for the wedding. It is a preparation for the wedding, even though he doesn't know it. And the fact that he slept the night before and ate breakfast in the morning so that he can have energy to cut the flowers that will end up at the wedding table means that everything he ate also is connected to the wedding. And the work he worked the day before to get the money to get the food to eat, it's all recite. It's a whole cycle to prepare for the wedding. And this is why Rashi, in the very first verse of the Torah, tells us, why did the Torah start with the letter Bet? Should have started with the letter Aleph. Bet. So Rashi says that the word Bereshis is really 2 words. Bet, Reshit. 2 beginnings, or 2 Reshits. What's Reshit? Reshit means the beginning. But in the Torah, Jews are referred to Reshis, the beginning of God's sort of inheritance, and the Torah is also referred to Reshit. In other words, the world was in the beginning. God created the world. Why did God create the world? For Jews and for Torah, and that's also why on every day of creation it finishes off that it was evening and it was morning and it was one day. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. What does it say by the 6th day? Vayera vayivoker yom. No. You say it every Friday night. What do you say? You make Kiddush. Yeah. What
Vayikulu.
no. You just said something different than what you said before.
Oh. Vayera, vayivoker, Yom HaShishi.
And what did you say before? Yom. When you said Yom, before you said Vayera, what did you say? Yom?
I said Yom HaShishi.
No, you said Yom Shishi.
Yom Shishi,
It should say Yom Shishi.
yeah,
It says Yom Hashi. What does Yom Hashishi mean?
the sixth.
No, it says right, the 6th day. What's the 6th day? It doesn't say the 1st day. It says Yom Rishon, Yom Echad, 1 day. Yom Sheni, 2 days. 2nd day, Yom Shishi, the 6th day. It says Yom the 6th day. Why the 6th day? Why the 6th day? So the Medrash tells us that there was something else major that happened in history on a 6th day. On the 6th day of the month of Sivan. You know what happened? God gave us the Torah on Sinai. And on the first Friday of creation, when God put the finishing touches to creation, as the sun set and creation was done, God said, it was evening, it was morning, thus 6th day. Everything I did up until now is hanging in the balance, hanging in the air. If the Jews accept the Torah, then it'll all stand. If not, then all of this will turn into nothingness.
Ooh.
Why? Because why did God create the world? For a wedding venue. To have a wedding venue where he can marry the Jewish people. So if the Jewish people don't accept the Torah, in other words, we don't accept the ring, we say no instead of yes, then what happens? You don't need a hall anymore. Sure, we may decide to have a party because we wasted all the money already, even though the bride backs out. But God didn't waste anything. God could just make it as if it never happened. So God's not going to have a party with himself if the bride says no. What happened? Did the bride say yes? Did we say yes? It's not so simple.
Oh, it says, not submission.
Right, but were we eager to say yes?
No.
No.
So have you ever heard the imagery of God holding a mountain over the people?
Yes.
Yeah,
Why? Why did God hold a mountain over the people and threaten them to take it? So it sounds like God forced them into marriage, almost like rape.
shotgun wedding.
Yeah, God forced us into marriage. However, Chassidus explains it's not exactly that. God, what it means is God didn't actually threaten us to kill us. God was saying, God showed us his hand by the 10 plagues and the exodus of Egypt and the splitting of the sea, that we were so enamored by his wealth and everything he had, we were forced, we were naive, we were sort of lured into saying yes, but weren't thinking straight. In the Megillah, in the story of Purim, it says the Jews accepted the Torah. What does it mean they accepted? They already accepted it at Sinai. So the Talmud says, yeah, by Sinai, it was just, it wasn't real. Because they did it because they were in love. And sure, many times for the next 1,000 years, the Jews were punished by God, but there was always a prophet. There was always a king. There was always a high priest to come in and save the day. Purim was the first time that the Jewish people were in danger. It was the first time they were exiled from Israel. For the last 1,000 years, they lived in Israel. First time they're out of their land. They have no prophets, or at least God doesn't reveal himself to anyone at that time. There's a decree to annihilate all the Jewish people. God has officially abandoned them. Officially, I mean, I don't mean officially. I mean, in their eyes, there's no message, there's nothing, there's no sign from God that he's there. And what did the Jews do? They stuck around. They didn't jump ship. And that was the first time in history that the Jews truly accepted the Torah. Truly, why? Because they were challenged. They didn't see God's open, great hand, and they said yes. That's when it's for real.
Is that why Purim is a festive holiday?
Yeah. In a way, it's one of the, perhaps the greatest holiday. Even though it says when Mashiach comes, 2 holidays we will still celebrate, Yom Kippur and Purim. However, Yom Kippur, you know what the full name of Yom Kippur is? Yom Kippurim, a day of atonement. But Kippurim sounds like like Purim. It's a day like Purim.
Oh, wow.
Now, Yom Kippurim is a biblical holiday. Purim is a rabbinic holiday, right? It's not in the 5 books of Moses. But still, Purim, in a sense, rises above everything else. Okay, why am I telling you all this? Getting back to the wedding. So we are sort of the centerpiece of the entire universe. The entire universe, again, not everyone sees this. In Moses' times, everyone saw it. Anyone tried to start up with the Jews, they were gone. When Mashiach comes, you'll see this. Today, we don't see this. You go to Spain and ask a non-Jew on the street, is he working to prepare the wedding of the Jewish people and God? He won't know what you're talking about. Right? Obviously. We're not saying this is what, but underneath, this is what's happening. The world is being prepared to usher in. So the Jew, like the bride, is sort of the soul of the wedding. The third cousin flying in from Australia is coming because of the bride, not because there's something special about the third cousin from Australia. Now, because she's coming to the wedding, now she's special. She's a guest at the wedding. But why is there a wedding? Why is she coming? Because there's a bride and a groom. So when the Jew does the mitzvah, it's not just, let's say we're studying at this table. It's not just this table that we're elevating. We're elevating the person who made the table. We're also elevating all the other tables, because in order for me to buy a table, the person, in order for it to be worth it for him to make a table that I can buy, he had to make 10,000 tables. So even though that 9,000 of the other tables are sitting in places that aren't being used for Torah, but because they were made in order to facilitate a table that I can use for Torah, in essence, all of that is also part of it. The fact that we're using a computer to disseminate Torah means that all the computers in the world are also being elevated, because in order for this computer to exist, there had to be many variations of this computer and other computers in order for us to get, NASA had to go to the moon for there to be a computer on my table. A lot of technology was developed going to the moon. So if you think about it, everything in the world is there all for one purpose. So when we do a mitzvah, even though, again, as we started, we're a small percentage, and the acts that we do are small percentages we can't even fathom how small the percentages of everything that goes on in the world. But ultimately, if you think about each individual thing, it all ties in and the whole world is connected. So when we do a mitzvah, we can elevate, we can make the whole world a dwelling place for God.
But back then they always expected God to come and save them. And then there's a period of time when he wasn't around, or wasn't around, but I mean, he wasn't there. But I think today, if it wasn't for God, Israel wouldn't be no more, because they're doing things that are unheard of.
It was always like that. However, at times, when you're in a good place, it's obvious that God is there. When you're in a bad place, that's when it's not obvious. And that's when it's necessary to be reminded of it. That just because he's not there doesn't mean, just because you don't see him doesn't mean he's not there.
They say that about Yosef. He was in the dungeon. He was in a dark place. And one of the reasons that he relied on the cup the cup keeper, though, when he said, yeah, remember me to the Pharaoh. Yeah, right. He sort of lost touch with God.
Yeah.
He was like at the nadir, the lowest point.
Yeah. Okay, let's see here. 5:10. Last two paragraphs on the page. 18 Adar 2, for those who might be watching that are not on in this Tanya. For the community of Israel, comprising 600,000 particular souls, we'll soon get into that number drop, is the general source of vitality for the world as a whole. So even though we're such a small number, but still we are like the soul of the whole world, since the world was created for the sake of these souls. Each specific one of them, in other words, each specific of the 600,000 souls contains, and to each is related the vitality of 1/600,000th part of the entire world. So the entire world is divided into 600,000, and each soul has a designated part of the world that he's responsible for. This part of the world depends on his vital soul for its elevation to God through the vital soul's own elevation. What does this mean? This means that one elevates his portion of the world by his partaking of this world for the requirements of his body and vital soul in the service of God. In other words, by using the objects of this world that one's body and vital soul need for the sake of serving God, one elevates his portion of the world. For example, eating, drinking, and the like, one's dwelling and all his utensils. Okay, so now, before we get to, there are more than 600,000 Jews today. So how do we get to 600,000 souls? Before we answer that question, let's step back. Why are there 600,000 souls? What is the number 600,000? Where does it come from?
Jews at Mount Sinai.
But why? Why is it so particular? By the way, the word Yisrael is an acronym. The word means something, but Yisrael is also an acronym. Yesh, Shishim, Ribui, Otiot, La Torah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah.
Oh,
Now, if you look in the Torah, how many letters are there? Not 600,000, or at least not 600,000 letters that we know of. But in the way letters are written in the Torah, different than like our Siddur, many letters are actually made up of a number of letters. So, for example, an Aleph is two Yuds, a regular Yud and an upside down Yud, and a Vav in the middle.
oh,
A Hey is a Daled and a little upside down Yud. Right? A Gimel is a Vav with like a backwards flipped Yud. So many letters are actually combination of letters. The way the letter is, it's a combination of a letter. So that's how you get to 600,000. In other words, if you take, there are 300 some thousand letters that we know, but if you take the letters, so a Yud is one letter, a Vav is one letter. But if you take all of these other letters that are made up of multiple letters, then you get 600,000, right? So why are there 600,000? It seems specific, that there are 600,000 letters in the Torah. There were 600,000 Jews, males of age, over the age of 20. At the giving of the Torah, so there were close to probably 2-3 million people, because if you think about all the men under 20 and all of the women
Children.
and children, well, yeah. So you have at least 2 million, probably more people at the giving of the Torah. But what's important about 600,000? So, generally speaking, every soul, there are 6 emotional attributes. 7, but really 6, because Malchus, the last one, is really just a collection of all the 6 so that it can transfer it to the next world. So there are 6 emotional attributes. For example, we know that Hillel, why did Hillel and Shammai argue about everything, or at least the house of Hillel, the students of Hillel and the students of Shammai argue? Because Hillel, their souls were more from the side of Chesed, from the right side. They were more lenient. They wanted to include more people. Whereas Shammai was more strict, more disciplined. He wanted fit yourself to the situation. Don't try to fit the situation to you. So every person can sort of align themselves with a specific attribute. However, we know that each attribute is really made up of all 10, because there are 10 attributes, emotional and intellectual. So that makes 60. And each one of these 60 is made up of 10, which is 600. Each one is made up of 10, which is 6,000. 5 times. Each one is made up of 10, which is 60,000, and then 600,000. If you take the name of God, so you have Vav. In the name, you have a Yud, a Hey, and a Vav. Vav is 6, the 6. Then you times it by 10, 5 times. Hey, 5. So times it by 10, 5 times. Then you get 600,000. It's like colors, right? You have the 3 foundational colors. And then you have infinite amount of colors that can be made with those 3 colors, right? So we have 6 categories of souls, 6 general souls, 6 general attributes. But depending on how you mix each one from the 10 and 10 of the 10 and 10, you have 600,000 different types of souls. Now, really, each one of these 600,000, but 600,000 isn't enough, because even just today, there's more than 600,000. When God gave us the Torah, there were more than 600. There's 600,000 males. What about all the women and children? They didn't have souls? Of course they did. And what about the hundreds of millions of Jews that have lived since then until today? So these 600,000 souls that left Egypt, they were considered the root souls. But then you have branches, and then you have leaves, and then you have sparks. So the branches, 600,000 souls, each soul had 600,000 branches, and each branch has 600,000 sparks. What's 600,000 times 600,000 times 600,000?
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's a few trillion, I think. A couple trillion. Now, there haven't been a couple trillion Jews, though, ever. So it's very possible that you have multiple sparks. You may have in you 15 different sparks. This perhaps ties into Gilgul, to reincarnation. What do you mean reincarnation? It doesn't mean that your soul doesn't find its resting place and comes back down. Part of your soul, perhaps, because we're all part of a big soul. So we may have been given 20 sparks. Let's say we elevated 10 of them. So 10 of them, that becomes the other 10 we didn't work with. We didn't utilize them. So they sort of have to come back. But the 10 that we had, that we elevated, they become our soul. That rests on high. And then, but the point is that all 600,000 souls and all their sparks have to come through this world and purify their part of the world, whatever that means. I don't know if now, this is part of a geographic thing. That's why it says in the Talmud that God did a kindness for us, that he spread us out in the world. Because if not, how would we purify the world? Now, it does say that there were 288 sparks that fell from the world of Tohu into this world, that make up this world that we have to elevate, and 243 of them were elevated in Egypt. That's why in the Torah it says 3 times, you should never return to Egypt. You have nothing to go back there for. We elevated everything to do there. So how does it make sense that in 200 years they elevated 283 sparks? And in the last 3,500 years, we haven't managed to elevate 5. Okay, Kabbalah speaks about it. They were the 600,000 root souls. They were able to accomplish much more. We're just sparks. And anyhow, there's many explanations to that. But the point is, every person has a specific purpose in this world, to elevate part of this world, to be responsible for part of this world. And this is how a minority of Jews can elevate the entire world. Again, not by fighting the world, but because recognizing that the whole world is really preparing it and helping you do your mission. You could study Torah because there are non-Jews all over the world making that possible. Like creating paper. It says that the purpose of the world is people should study Torah. Can you imagine if everyone in the world was a Torah scholar and studied Torah? You imagine that for a second. Why can't you imagine that?
Because the whole world would come to a stop.
Why?
Because there would be, like you say, there would be no engineers and no.
Who would have the patience to go plant something in the field if they could study? Which professor is willing to plunge his toilet? I don't mean that. I should plunge the toilet. Can you imagine if everyone said that? We'd have no toilets to plunge. We'd have no food to eat. So therefore, a person who doesn't study Torah shouldn't look at themselves as something less than. On the contrary, without them, without the chef in the Navy, without the chef in the Navy, the Marines wouldn't be able to fight the war. Imagine if everyone went to the front lines. They'd all be killed because they'd have no ammunition. They'd have no nothing.
But if it came to the point where everybody's studying Torah, isn't that when the Mashiach comes?
And not everyone, all Jews.
Okay,
We still need to eat. We still need to print Torah. Who's going to make the paper? Who's going to make the ink? Who's going to make the printers?
You still need the collateral, right?
The whole world. When Mashiach comes, the non-Jews won't disappear. The world will remain the way it is. It'll just be revealed that everyone is there for a united purpose. Everyone will worship the same God. Not everyone's going to study Torah. Torah wasn't given to the world. Most of Torah isn't applicable to the world. There are some parts that are. There are some parts that are. The non-Jews have 7 laws that they have to know, and a lot of those details are in the Torah. There's no question there will be a lot. Every person will study Torah, but not every person will dedicate their lives to study Torah. It won't be that. It's not their purpose. Well, yeah. Okay. So now here, in the middle of 511. So these 600,000 particular souls, however, are roots. And like a root from which grows numerous branches, each root soul subdivides into 600,000 sparks, each spark being one neshama. Similarly, within nefesh and ruach in each of the 4 worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, Asiyah. So in each of these 4 worlds, all are found, all 3 soul levels, nefesh, ruach, neshama. Okay.
So it's 600,000 times 600,000 times 4 in each of the worlds,
Well, no, it's 600,000 times 600,000 in each world.
in each world, right, times 4 would be the.
Right, but I don't know if it, I'm not sure exactly
Okay.
how it works. This is more Kabbalah.
Right.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a lot.
it's a lot.
okay.
I don't want to. I don't want to bind myself to numbers that I'm not. This is more Kabbalistic that I'm not familiar with. Okay,
600,000 is a finite number,
correct.
and now we are talking about the infinite number, and it has there's no end to it. Really, when you think about it.
Why is there infinite?
is-
What's
The
infinite?
number of people, the number of souls.
No, it says Mashiach comes once all the souls are finished. Once all the souls are emptied from the chest, from the treasure of souls in heaven. Once they're all. That's why it's a mitzvah to have kids. Having kids is bringing Mashiach. That's what God said to Adam and Eve. He put them in the Garden of Eden. What did he tell them was the only mitzvah they had, besides the negative mitzvah of not eating from the fruit? But the only thing they had to do, be fruitful and multiply and fill up the world and conquer it.
So use up all the souls.
Use up all, fill up the world. In other words, there's a limit. How many souls have to be born to fill up the world so that we can make the world a dwelling place for God? This is our objective. This is our job. And Adam and Eve weren't just Jews. They weren't Jews.
No.
The whole world. They're the parents of all human beings. Every human being, the first mitzvah of the 7 Noah, the very first mitzvah. It's not one of the 7 Noahide laws, because the 7 Noahide laws are negative mitzvahs, besides perhaps the belief in God. But really, even that, it's the negative of worshiping idols. There is a positive there too. But the Noahide laws are negatives. But the be fruitful and to have kids is a mitzvah given to Adam and Eve. Isn't the mitzvah given to Jews? Jews have a separate mitzvah. They were given a separate mitzvah later. But the mitzvah, no, the rabbinic mitzvah to have as many kids, not to stop by 2, which is the mitzvah, because there's no number. So when do you do the mitzvah? When have you fulfilled the mitzvah? It doesn't say how many kids to have. So whenever there isn't a number, you take the minimum. The minimum is 2, because if you do plural, pru urevu means to multiply. What's the minimum of multiplication? Is more than 1 is 2. So technically, if you've had 2 kids, the Talmud takes it even further. There has to be a son and a daughter, but they can only be considered son and daughter if they have a son and a daughter. So really, you never know who's not going to have kids. So the rabbi said, just don't stop, because you never know. Besides, like, every child is a mitzvah, even though 2 is the minimum, it doesn't mean the 3rd one isn't the mitzvah. It's still the same mitzvah. Yeah. So really, every child's a mitzvah, and technically there is no limit to the mitzvah.
It's
But it's not infinite. At a certain point, Mashiach, there isn't an infinite amount. There may be a very high number of souls, but not infinite. Infinite is there's a definition to infinite. If you can, yeah, if there's a count, then there's an end.
Right. Because when all the souls are used up, the Mashiach comes.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll,
So finite number.
That's
We
it.
don't know what that finite number is.
Right. But there isn't. Why not?
If what could happen to that?
The Rambam says one of the tenets of our belief, exactly, one of the tenets of our faith, one of the 13 principles of faith is that to believe Mashiach can come today.
Right.
I see.
You have no idea. We have no way of, just because he didn't come for 2,000 years doesn't mean he won't come. He's gonna come at a certain point, and it's gonna be a shock. Why can't that shock be today?
Right. Which
Why can't it be
child is
right
gonna get the last soul?
That's a very good question.
Then there's no more souls for anyone comes after that.
So, okay, that's
When Mashiach is born, it'll be the last soul.
no Mashiach. There's always a Mashiach. The soul of Mashiach is the soul. It was born on Tisha B'av. That's what it says. Tisha B'av. The Talmud says Mashiach was born. It means the soul of Mashiach. And in every generation, there's always someone that has that soul that's ready for Mashiach to come. And Mashiach comes, God doesn't want to wait. So there's always someone that's capable. It says in the Talmud that the students of Rav said that Mashiach's name is Rav, and the students of Menachem said Menachem is the name of Mashiach. Because there always has to be a Mashiach. So look around the world. Who would you want Mashiach to be? Now we know Mashiach has to be a God-fearing Jew, someone who comes from the house of David, right? A male who comes from the house of David. So not everyone could be, but you can be.
No.
We know you can't be. I could be. I don't know.
That's true.
You can be.
Not that German, because I'm a house lady, but
Right.
I wasn't at one point then I mean, there were certain factions who might have said that the Rebbe was the Mashiach.
But
But I'm saying every generation.
every person thought his Rebbe was Mashiach. Who's more qualified than my Rebbe to be Mashiach?
Right.
Why? If you don't think that, what type of chassid are you?
Yeah, right.
If you think there's someone else that's greater than your Rebbe, why you his
Go to him.
go to him?
So it can't be if it's a Levi, if you're a Levi or a Cohen, you can't be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only from the house of David, from the house of Judah, so 1/12 of the Jewish people, and in that itself, only from the house of David.
See, you're excluded.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You're just gonna be a follower at that time.
It's fascinating, right? That you have the okay. So now let's get back. Let's readdress an original question that we had. Why should the soul come into this world? Before you came here to Tanya class, or even now, why does the soul come into exile, comes into this body, it's trapped inside of it? We discussed this at length in the last chapter, right? It can't experience what it experienced in heaven because it's limited by the body, even a tzaddik. So why do it? Usually, when you take something and move it out of its place, there's a reason. And usually the reason has something to do with the object that you're moving. So what does the neshama need? What is the neshama doing here? If it could be experiencing God's presence, it was a part of God, and now it's here in a body, fighting for its life. So we said it needs to make the world a dwelling place for God. But what does the neshama need? And this is a turning point, I think, in the way we see ourselves and the way we see the world. The Alter Rebbe says, your soul has no reason to be in this world for itself. Your soul was perfect. We say the neshama that in the morning, right? In the morning blessing, my God, the neshama that you created, you formed, it's pure, it's perfect. You created it, you formed it, you made it. It's your work, handiwork, it's perfect. Why did God put it in here? To do God's work, to make the world a dwelling place for him.
But then he has to fix it every night.
Fix what?
Your soul. He cleans it and fixes it.
Doesn't fix it.
Gives it back to you.
He removes any of the negative things that got stuck to it from its fight. When the soldier comes home at the end of a day's work, his clothes have to be washed and he has to be fed and he has to be nourished so he can go out and fight the next day. But why is the soldier going to fight? Not because the soldier needs the fight. The soldier would be much healthier and much happier if he stayed home and took care of his kids. The soldier if the soldier has any personal agenda in fighting, he'll probably get killed in the battlefield. If you enter combat to get a rank, to become someone, in all likelihood, you will never get there. Who makes it to the general? Someone who was a good soldier, someone who followed orders, someone who didn't have an agenda of becoming a general. Now, I'm not saying if you become a general, you can't lose it all, right? You can't, but even a tzaddik could. We all have free choice. But who becomes a general? You enter the battle because that's what the king needs you to do, or the country, in today's language.
The person needs to have passion for the cause. And the cause, in this case, is the Jewish people and the Mashiach. That's the cause.
The cause is doing what God wants it to do.
Mhm. But they have to be passionate about it, because if they're not committed to it, they're probably not going to be successful. They're probably going to find themselves faltering at some point.
Right. So now take yourself. We're thinking of it sitting, lounging in the United States of America. Imagine yourself sitting in Poland the day before Nazi Germany invades. Okay. And you're not in the mood. You're not passionate about fighting in the battle. So you're going to stay home. Is that an option? Why is that not an option? I'm not passionate about it. Why should I go to war? Why is that not an option?
Because your freedom will be gone.
Your freedom will be gone. Your life will be gone. You'll be done. Your life won't be a life if the Nazis occupy you, right? When a Jew realizes the whole reason for my existence is to make the world a dwelling place for God. So if I wake up in the morning and I'm not in the mood, or I'm not passionate about it, so I was like, today I'm going to take a back seat. You know what? That's the day you lose the battle. And now your life, you may think you're enjoying life, but you're not. Your purpose for living isn't there anymore. Your purpose for being here, the soul's purpose for being here, is to advance God's agenda, to fulfill God's desire. Now, you may not realize it tomorrow. So you wake up tomorrow and you say, you know what, I'm not going to come to the Tanya Club, whatever. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to put my Judaism on hold for a week.
I'm not going to say my prayers in the morning.
I'm not in the mood. I'm not doing it. Okay. The next day, you might not feel like you lost the battle. What happens a few months down the road? You start feeling empty. You start feeling like you're losing everything. Where does that feeling come from?
Because you're missing something that has been important in your life.
It's not just that it's been important in your life. Why was it? It has been your life.
Your soul.
You just probably didn't, perhaps you may not have been in touch with it. You may not have realized it. Most people on their deathbed, this is famous, right? The doctors, nurses will say they never heard someone regret that he didn't spend more time at work. Why not? If you would ask them on a regular day, what is more important in their life, their career or their family life? You ask a 30-something-year-old who's not married, their career is more important. But if they were laying on a deathbed right now, what would they regret? Not getting married earlier.
Not having spent more time with their family.
Family earlier, right?
Mhm.
What changed in that moment?
Mhm.
What changed in that moment is just perspective. Nothing changed.
Mhm.
So when we recognize our neshama came down into this world, not for itself, it doesn't need to be here. It came here just to fulfill God's desire, God's purpose. Now, the neshama is in great danger when it comes into this world because it's in a body. And the body has its own desires, and the body has its own agenda. And we spoke about this in the JLI in the first few lessons. We spoke about it many times in Tanya. What's the primary, at least quantitatively, what's the primary mode of function of the person? How do you function more often than not as your animal soul, your body, or your godly soul, as the animal soul in the body? So more often than not, our soul, our godly soul, is an uphill battle. And therefore, it could get tired. It could get impacted. It could fall. It could bruise, or it could get dirty and schmutzig, and it needs to be cleaned. It needs to be careful. It needs to be careful not to be affected and impacted by the body and by the world around it. Now, it can't fulfill its mission without the body and without the world around it. It needs it, but it also can't allow it to be influenced by it. Okay, let's read a little more and then we'll at the bottom of 511. Each spark did not descend into this world to perfect itself, because it doesn't need perfection. It is perfect, but to perfect the body and vital soul and its place in the world, as we said right before, as the Alter Rebbe will soon conclude. Though it is indeed a great descent, a veritable exile for the soul, for even if it becomes in this world a perfect tzaddik, serving God with fear and delighting in abounding love of Him. In other words, it's as perfect as a human can get. It will not attain to the quality of its attachment to God with fear and love that the soul experienced prior to its descent into this corporeal world, nor to a fraction of its earlier fear and love. In other words, even if the person becomes a perfect tzaddik, his soul will never experience in this life even a fraction of what it experienced in the previous life. So the soul coming into this world has no, it's not trying to perfect itself. It is perfect. In fact, there is no comparison or similarity whatsoever between them. In other words, between the love and fear of God experienced by a soul on earth and that of the soul above. For as is obvious to every intelligent man, the body could not bear, etc. In other words, a love and fear of such intensity as the soul experienced above in the spiritual realms can't be experienced by the body. If your soul would experience in here, in the body, what it experiences up there, the body couldn't contain it. That's what happened when the God gave us the Torah and we heard God speak. What does it say? It says their souls left their body, they died. Their souls left their body. God had to re-alive them.
Reattach.
Yeah, but there's resurrect them. Thank you. But its descent into this world to be clothed in a body and vital soul is for the sole purpose of perfecting them, not itself, but them, the animal soul and the body, the vital soul and the body. What does it need to do to perfect? What does it mean to perfect the body and the vital soul? To separate them from the evil of the three impure klipot by observing the 365 prohibitions and their offshoots. In other words, by observing the biblical and rabbinical prohibitions, and to elevate his vital soul together with the portion of the world at large that relates to it, like we said before, binding and uniting them with the Ein Sof light, which he draws into them by performing all the 248 positive mitzvot through the agency of the vital soul. So through abstaining from the negative, through performing the positive, he can remember the body and the animal soul are klipas noga. They're this klipa that's this neutral matter, and they can elevate it to godliness, but if they perform a sin, they can degrade it to the three impure. A person's job is to separate the body and the vital soul from the impure and elevate it to God, to the divine. Since the vital soul is the one that performs all mitzvot involving action, as explained above in chapter 36, that the divine soul can activate the body and performance of the mitzvot only by way of the vital soul, right? The godly soul can't do a mitzvah without the vital soul, because the person isn't alive without a vital soul. Without the vital soul, the soul can't put on tefillin. When we walk into a cemetery, we don't wear our tzitzis. We tuck in our tzitzit because we don't want to embarrass the deceased. We don't, because they can't do a mitzvah. We can do a mitzvah because we have a body and a vital soul. It is likewise written in Eitz Chaim, portion 26, that the divine soul itself does not need perfecting at all. And there is no need for it to be embodied in this world in a body and vital soul, except to draw down light to perfect them. In other words, the vital soul and the body and the rest of the part of the world that was designated for their. And this parallels exactly the mystery of the exile of the Shekhinah, whose purpose is to refine the sparks of holiness which fell into the klipot. In other words, God himself is in exile. Why would God be in exile? To elevate, to make the world a dwelling place for God. So too does the divine soul enter into exile within the body and vital soul in order to perfect them and to extract them from the sparks of holiness which they contain. And then, next 2 weeks, or the next 2 lessons, we will see how this it'll reformulate for us the relationship between thought and action, learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. We'll talk about that next week and the following week.
So God needs us as much as we need him.
So there's a difference in the way God needs us and we need him, but in a sense, God needs us more than we need him. Because without us, the world can't become a dwelling place for God. But without God, we don't exist, but we don't need to exist.
Because our purpose is to.
But our purpose is to facilitate his desire, so he needs us. Yes, we need him in order to do that, but technically, we don't need him. We don't need to be here. No one asked us to be born. I mean, we didn't ask to be born, so we don't need him, technically.
But our job now is to.
Once we were created, we were created for a purpose. In order to fulfill that purpose, we need God. There's a very big difference also. We need God. God only needs us because this is what he decided he wanted. He wanted to get married. God didn't have to want to get married. And he could have made his own wedding. He's God.
Right.
But he decided that he wants us to make the wedding for him. Well, he wants us to be his bride, and he wants the world to make the wedding for him. That's how he decided. So now, because that's he decided, he needs that.
They're introducing this concept of the vital soul. We've always been talking about the vital soul and vital soul, or is
The
it-
animal soul, it's
I mean.